Hi, everybody. Welcome to OrgVitality's virtual conference. I've got 12 o'clock on the nose, so I'm going to kick things off here. My name is Jeff Saltzman, and I hope everybody is staying healthy wherever you may happen to be. Um, Over the next 2 days, OrgVitality, we call it OV, will be hosting about 10 of these sessions. Most are about 30 minutes in length. A few go for an hour. And we're very excited that across the sessions, we have about 600 registered participants. So very, very pleased with the level of turnout that we are getting and the level of interest in these sessions. We at OV are excited to be able to present a combination of both research-based and company experience-based sessions. I hope you enjoy this next session. And should you want to attend any of the others, it's not too late to register. Here's a listing of the other sessions that will be happening over the next 2 days. Most but not all the sessions will be recorded, and most but not all the sessions will distribute material afterwards. There'll be a short feedback survey at the end of the session, so please take a moment and let us know how we did. If you have any questions, we will attempt to address them at the end of the session, but should we run out of time, we'll be happy to send a follow-up email to answer your questions. If you go on the Zoom panel, there should be a little box that would open up that would give you a little area to post questions. I also want to mention that after our last session on Friday, that 4:15 session, we're inviting all participants to stay for a virtual happy hour. Grab a drink, either alcoholic or not, come off mute, and chat with other industry professionals about what we're dealing with or what you're dealing with right now. Both Jen Acosta from Allstate and Sachin Jain from PepsiCo will be sticking around for the happy hour. So it's a chance to ask them some more questions as well if you'd like. If you want to attend, please register for the session by visiting the conference page of our website. You'd register for that 4:15 session and just stick around afterwards. We'll hope that you come for the whole session, but if you want to stay just for the happy hour, register for the session and then just click in and join at about 5:15. So far, so good? Okay, let's get on with this first session of the conference. As I mentioned, this session is managing people through uncertainty, and I'm Jeff Saltzman. I'm the CEO of OrgVitality. I will be sending out copies of these slides, or you will be getting copies of these slides afterwards. So don't feel you have to write everything down. And I'm going to try to answer questions towards the end, but I timed this and it pretty much fills the half hour. So if we don't have time and you would like a question answered, just ask it anyway, and I will respond after the session. I want to go through a bunch of things you probably already know about managing through uncertainty, but it represents a good refresher. You know, this is the old Maslow's hierarchy, Psych 101, right? We all know this. And people tend to revert to lower level needs, right, during periods of uncertainty. There's a strong desire to have basic needs met. You know, if you tried to buy toilet paper, eggs, milk in the last few weeks, you know exactly what's going on. There's other speculation about supply chains and all that, but you know, why is there the run on some of these basic necessities? People want to make sure that their basic needs are covered, sort of like a check the box kind of activity. So what causes that reversion? What happens is, you know, fear is generated in your brain by the amygdala, right? The amygdala, also called the primitive brain or the reptilian brain, this is the old part of the brain. This is where basic emotions originate from. And the amygdala, looking around, it's seeing what's happening with this virus, with unemployment, with the uncertainty of the situation. and it's putting out fear signals. That fear is generally moderated by the neocortex, or literally the neo or new part of the brain. In order to moderate the fear, the neocortex is out there looking for information, right? It's searching high and low for information. And with the high degree of uncertainty that is in our environment today, we have a lack of information. So you take that fear generated by the amygdala, you throw in a good dose of uncertainty because of a lack of information, and what you're doing is generating anxiety, right? If you take that anxiety and you combine it with a social contagion, right, such as seeing the fearful reaction of others, or going to a store and seeing that everybody's buying toilet paper, what do they know that I don't, right? Or you hear about conspiracy theories such as this virus is a biological weapon, or you get exposed to fear mongering, dividing a population, for instance, that needs to be united in face of a threat like we're facing. That anxiety can turn into panic, right? Panic used to be triggered by personal interactions, by going out and talking to people, by seeing people, by looking at their behavior. But today, social media allows people to sneeze on you from a distance, triggering that panic. Further, what you have is worry, which originates from that anxiety, becomes a feedback loop. And taking actions to reduce that worry, taking actions, whether it's your employee population or your folks at home, taking action that reduces the worry will also reduce anxiety. But worry by itself, of course, doesn't solve anything. Uncertainty and fear can lead to changes in behavior, right? And here's some data uh, that are the results of a study that we ran in 2008. This was during the period of what was called the Great Recession, that shows the vast majority of people with concerns about their financial well-being were in fact changing their behavior. So it may be obvious, in fact it is obvious, but the bottom line here is when people do have these fears, when faced with uncertainty, their behaviors will in fact change, right? Why, for instance, why didn't the USA, I should say, take immediate action when observing what was happening in China with this virus? Why today are some states loosening restrictions while others don't? Right? Gideon Litchfield sums up the paradox inherent in this pandemic nicely. We're so tightly interconnected that a virus can reach each one of us. Right? It becomes global very, very quickly. Yet we are so insular that we cannot conceive of what happens in one place repeating itself in another. And uncertainty and unchecked fear can lead to this freeze or flight reaction. But of course, it's possible to fight against the threat. Some of us quite heroically, if you look at the nurses in New York City. In other words, the logic of the neocortex can plan out a fight response that overrides the primitive fear put out by the amygdala. As FDR said, right, courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important. So in other words, how do you overcome that fear response in the amygdala? By putting out information, by having plans, and implementing those plans in a methodical fashion. Some organizations and some CEOs, I've run into a good share of them myself, believe that by keeping an organization chaotic, that it drives performance and creativity. The truth, though, is that chaos is not an organizing principle or a way to achieve higher levels of creativity or performance. It's simply chaos. And chaos leads to greater amounts of uncertainty, which prevents the higher functions of your brain from moderating the fear in uncertain times. Models of organizational behavior and organizational performance can act as guidelines as to how do we address the uncertainty that we're experiencing even if they're not perfect. In uncertain and fear-inducing situations, what are people looking for? They're looking for trustworthy, decisive leadership which points to a solution path, right? After 9/11, trust and leadership scores from a normative perspective when we studied employees increased. But trust once squandered doesn't magically return when needed, right? We are in the middle, OV is in the middle of collecting data from a free COVID pulse we're offering. And so far, the leadership scores at the company level, we're not asking about political leadership, but so far the leadership scores at the company level that we're collecting are very, very high. People are looking for sound leadership when faced with these challenges that we're all experiencing today. The desire in threatening situations, the desire for information is insatiable. The neocortex is searching for information to moderate the fear being generated, and information can reduce uncertainty, allowing that moderation to occur. Open, honest, trustworthy communications are critical, as is giving information that is useful in reducing uncertainty. What happens in the absence of information? In the absence of accurate information, people make up their own stories, right? They're open to lies, false information, or misinformation really predominates the narrative. The stories that people often generate, by the way, as they make up for the lack of information, are often much worse than the actual reality. For without the information, the neocortex needs to moderate the amygdala reigns supreme. What's the right communication vehicle in a crisis? Who do your employees want to hear it with? Employees want to hear the truth. They want to hear it from the top of the house, the CEO. Invariably, right, the employees are looking for open, honest, accurate information from the highest level in the corporation that they can get their hands on. Paul Volcker summed up this credibility notion. He was the chairman of the Federal Reserve from 79 to 87. He was credited with taming the runaway inflation that the US was experiencing at that time. And he would tell his people, in the middle of a crisis, the only asset we have is our credibility. And he made sure he did not squander his credibility. Another aspect of getting people more information and increasing is by increasing their involvement in the day-to-day activities that's helping the organization deal with the crisis. So get people involved in solving problems. Give them as much control over their own future as possible, or a sense of control over their own future. After 9/11, for instance, we found that pride, engagement among employees actively involved in restoring a company's operation increased dramatically. There was one client in particular who had folks down literally at ground zero in Manhattan. And those who were brought back immediately and saying, help us return this company to an operational state, their scores on satisfaction, pride, engagement took a very, very positive, strong turn. And that was when compared to those not involved in getting the company back stood up. And the scores of those who were not involved took a precipitous decline. We tracked this, by the way, for a number of years afterwards. And what we found is that the company, as hard as they tried, could not hold on to that positive shift in attitudes. After a few years, it dissipated. Terry Morrissey, who wrote an article for the Irish Times. It was based on a book she has coming out. It's just coming out now. It's called Uncertainty Rules, Making Uncertainty Work for You. Co-author is Richard Plenty. She suggests at the personal level that there's three main things you should be doing to sort of take control in a uncertain environment. The first thing she suggests is to take responsibility. Take personal responsibility for your actions and their impact on others. Hold yourself accountable. Do not blame others for the situation you're in. Second, she says, have an overarching sense of purpose, right? Have both strong core values and a clear sense of purpose. Know what it is you stand for. With scant information, we need to know both what we stand for and, importantly, where we're headed. The third aspect that she suggests at the personal level is to accept there are certain things you're not going to be able to control. Accept that there are many things outside of your control. What you can control, however, is your responses to those uncontrollables. We don't have to react blindly, nor do we have to sit and do nothing. Seek out facts, seek out information, right? Build scenarios of how to respond, weigh choices and consequences. Learn to manage anxiety and emotions so you look for sensible and rational action rather than being seduced by quick fixes or others claiming to have the right answers. So this is at a personal level. But what I'd like to do now is take it up to what should an organization be doing, right? How does an organization sort of take control in an uncertain environment? And this is a model I'd like to present to you we call it employee confidence. It's a model I developed during the 2007, 2008 Great Recession. And here's the essence of the model. During the 2007, 2008, we asked 15,000 people each quarter in the world's 12 largest economies questions based on in the above framework, right? So we asked people questions about the organization, and we asked about the organization from an internal functioning perspective and an external attractiveness of products perspective. We also ask about people's personal situation, internally about their current job, about skill development in their current environment, which you could call that job security, and personal level from an external standpoint about career security, which is if the organization you're at, for whatever reason, had to let you go, could you land on your feet elsewhere, right? So a very simple kind of model. We averaged the components of the model together to coalesce into an overall employee confidence score. And we found meaningful relationships with these 4 cells in aggregate to employees' individual behavior, such as would they stay or would they leave the organization. And if they had less confidence in an organization, they were much more likely, makes sense, to be looking for jobs elsewhere. It also affected, as I showed you before, their intention to purchase goods or service. So if they had less confidence in the organization they were at, they also pulled back on their personal lives, not buying that refrigerator or TV that they may need. We also found relationships between this model at the company level. And here we plotted the model against total shareholder return. So that what we found is the employees were essentially a good reflection of how the company was performing. And when the employees had higher levels of confidence in the company, what we found is total shareholder return at those companies was greater. We also looked at this at the industry level, and we found that where employee confidence was lower, there was an increase in bankruptcy filings within that particular industry. And we also took it even up a notch further. We looked at this at the country level. In other words, we were surveying 12 separate countries on these items, and we looked at how people responded to these items against the change in GDP scores at the country level. And we found a strong rank order correlation between the levels of employee confidence and in aggregate at the country level, and whether that was in a country where GDP was experiencing growth or where GDP was shrinking. In other words, employees form a window through which you can view various aspects of performance. But we also found that the results can cause the implementation of what I would call a virtuous cycle, whereby organizations taking actions which resulted in higher confidence among employees also performed better. And the employee attitudes were a leading indicator of that performance. This becomes an organizing framework by which organizations can systematically work through their challenges in an uncertain time. What do I mean by that? If you look at this model and say, well, what should they be doing? From an organization internal perspective, people should be looking at their internal processes, ensure that the checks and balances are in place and to be well run and effective. From an external perspective, are the products and services you're offering in line with what people are looking for these days, right? From a personal internal perspective, do you have a sense of fairness and equality within the organization? Are you open and transparent with the challenges that the organization is facing? And from a personal external perspective, are you a good place to be from? Are you providing people with the help, the development that they need so that if they do need to be exited, they can land on their feet, right? So this is a framework, if you will, that can help guide what organizations should be focused on in an uncertain environment. They should be able to plot out activities in each of these cells, and it would increase employee confidence if they can demonstrate that to the employee population. How do they make that change? Well, you probably have heard of Kurt Lewin, right? Or Kurt Lewin, I guess is the correct pronunciation. He's considered the father of social psychology and applied psychology in the United States. And he developed a change model, right? And he kept it very simple. If you have a large cube of ice, but realize that what you want is a cone of ice, what do you have to do to turn a cube into a cone? Well, first you must melt the ice to make it amenable to change, right? You have to unfreeze it. Then you must mold the iced water into the shape you want. You have to change. And finally, you must solidify the new shape or refreeze the ice, right? What we're facing right now, this moment in time in organization, is in fact a potential unfreeze moment for organizations out there. This is an opportunity to challenge the beliefs, values, and attitudes, the behaviors that currently define the organization. The challenge we're facing today is an opportunity for organizations to re-examine themselves. It's the energy that can melt that ice, that can unfreeze the current equilibrium, allowing for change to occur. And it can be the strong motivation needed, right? Nothing like, will we survive this event, to create strong motivation to seek out a new equilibrium. So rather than looking at the problems we face today as simply problems, they can also be looked at as opportunities to improve. As you think then about what is the content of what we want to unfreeze, how do we move from that unfreeze to a new form and to a refreeze? This is a model that I developed after 9/11. It was developed with an acquaintance of mine, and the example we used as we thought through this was, if you think about FBI agents prior to 9/11, FBI agents, their job was to collect evidence, to work with a prosecutor, to develop a case against a criminal. After 9/11, the role of the FBI agent was not so much to build a case to go to court, but it was to prevent terrorism. The skills that you need to build a case, dusting for fingerprints, collecting evidence, putting it together in something that will stand up in court, is very different than the skill sets you would need to prevent terrorism, right? So working with my friend, we developed this model. The first part of the model, when you want to move someone from a task, what that they're very used to and maybe have been doing for a large part of their years, their career, the first thing you have to do is hone your message. Why is this change needed? Explain the actions being taken. You want to help people envision the new organization, right? And you want to describe the future business plans and the strategy, right? What is this about? Why do we have to make this change? And what will the new organization begin to look like? The second phase, if you're going to change your organization, is you have to enable performance, right? Those FBI agents who knew how to dust for fingerprints needed a different skill set when it became how do you do activities that would prevent terrorism. So you have to invest in those who remain. You have to develop the skills that they're going to need to be successful in the new organization, and you want to train them. The third part of this is you want to envision the future. You want to make sure that the employees who remain, the survivors, you want to describe a future full of promise for them. You want to describe their potential roles in that future. And you want to encourage their participation, right? The internal locus of control I showed you before. You want to encourage their participation in inventing that future, right? Regardless if you undertake layoffs, you're going to have a challenge ahead. How do you give those who remain a reason not to jump ship at the first opportunity that comes along as you rebuild the organization? And how do you convince new hires to join? This model can help you solve for that. I'm reminded of a quote that General Eisenhower gave when he was trying to solve problems. He said, "Whenever I run into a problem I can't solve, I always make it bigger. I can never solve it by trying to make it smaller, but if I make it big enough, I can begin to see the outlines of a solution." Today, we have a big problem. The problem is facing us not only as organizations, but as a society as a whole. The problem's already there. It's already plenty big. The question is, do we have any leadership to solve it? So thanks for listening. A couple of just follow-up pieces of information. OrgVitality is offering a free pulse survey, a COVID pulse survey aimed at people working remotely or not remotely. We're currently available in 13 languages. I think we have 40 or 50,000 people who've completed it already. We're offering it to both organizations that are our clients as well as those who are not. So we're just making it available for free for organizations who would like to better understand the situation that their employees currently find themselves in. So if you'd like to get a copy of that survey or use our systems to administer it, just let us know and we'd be happy to set you up. So this is as I said, the first session of our 2-day conference. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for listening. Goodbye, everybody.